Formula One dominates American headlines this weekend. Dale Earnhardt Jr., Tony Stewart, and Clint Bowyer are set to test the next-gen car tomorrow. And let's talk about this coming Wednesday night's Groovy Hollow 200. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove. I hope your week is off to a fantastic start. It was a fantastic weekend this past weekend if you're a motorsports fan living in America. NASCAR playoffs continued on at Kansas. It was a pretty good race. If you missed my race recap yesterday, that's what I thought. And then, of course, Formula One raced in Austin, Texas, their one and only race on American soil in 2021. The tense championship battle over there continued to captivate audiences. But we'll talk about Formula One and NASCAR, and we'll discuss what I think the general public is getting wrong about this past weekend. We're going to focus in on the key differences between the US and Formula One in just a few minutes, but we have a big news story that I want to talk about first. NASCAR confirmed today that Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Clint Bowyer will both test the next-gen car tomorrow at Bowman Gray Stadium. Motorsport.com actually reported this earlier in the weekend, and they also reported that Tony Stewart will also test the next-gen car tomorrow at Bowman Gray. In fact, the way tomorrow's schedule seems to line up is that Tony Stewart will conduct a Goodyear tire test with the next gen at Bowman Gray in the morning, and then Bowyer and Jr. will test the next gen in the afternoon. More of a media opportunity, both of them working for both big networks, Bowyer for Fox, Jr. for NBC, getting some seat time, some firsthand experience with the next gen. This test will apparently be open to all media. I do not believe the general public is going to have access to this test, but this is a pretty sweet deal. We have 3 veteran drivers, 3 fan favorite drivers, and 2 Hall of Fame drivers testing the all-new race car. But the reason that's important is because they're going to provide very interesting feedback. Up to this point, or up until the last month or so, most of the drivers who tested the next-gen car were younger drivers. William Byron's, Christopher Bell's, Eric Jones. Joey Logano got some time with it. Kurt Busch and Martin Truex got some time with it, but that was on a road course where everyone seems to agree the car drives pretty well when the steering's not an issue. It wasn't until the Charlotte Roval test a couple weeks ago that some more veteran drivers got their hands on the race car for the first time. So now we're going to get Tony Stewart, who is certainly not going to hold back his honest thoughts on the car. Plus, of course, Dale Jr., Clint Bowyer, will see what input they can give as well. But this is a big deal because any and all feedback should be welcomed by NASCAR. I mean, that Roval test a couple weeks ago was not smooth. This is the car that's supposed to vault NASCAR into the next era. So much is riding on the next gen. It debuts in real competition in less than like 3 or 4 months. And as of just a couple of weeks ago, there are still plenty of kinks that need to be worked out. And there are still many question marks about how this car is even going to race, what the racing is going to look like, what NASCAR is trying to get the racing to look like when it comes to intermediate tracks, of which there are still many on the schedule next season. So there are still a ton of concerns with the next gen car about how it's going to race, how teams are going to operate within this new business model. There's still a ton of concerns. Tony Stewart, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Clint Bowyer, I'm glad they're going to get their hands on this car and be able to speak to NASCAR off the record, if you will, away from the public. They'll be able to share their firsthand concerns with the car. Drivers who've been there, done that, seen multiple iterations, multiple generations of race cars. I mean, Tony Stewart's driven open wheel cars as well. Like, these are guys that know what they're talking about. They know what to expect from a race car, and NASCAR is going to get their feedback firsthand. That's great. It's also really cool to see them racing at Bowman Gray, or testing at Bowman Gray. This is obviously in preparation for the LA Clash race in February. The track that NASCAR is building within the LA Memorial Coliseum is set to be very similar to what's at Bowman Gray in North Carolina. That race will be the first time the next gen car is used in actual competition, so it's important to get it right. Hopefully the tire test goes well tomorrow, but share your thoughts down below. What do you think of Dale Jr., Tony Stewart, Clint Bowyer getting back behind the wheel of a NASCAR Cup Series car? Once again, even though it's just a test. I think that's pretty cool. I remember a couple of years ago, Tony Stewart, who was already retired from NASCAR, he was the first, I think, or one of the first to test Circuit of the Americas in a NASCAR stock car. So I kind of like them using Tony Stewart in this role. I'm glad he's willing to do it. I'm glad he's up for it. I think that's great. Great feedback he's likely going to provide. Now, I'm very excited about an event that I'm putting on in association with AE Engine and Podium Esports this coming Wednesday night, the Groovy Hollow 200. It's an iRacing race, but with a Halloween spooky twist to it. We've got our mystery driver, of course, that will be participating. We have a lot of drivers set to take on the mysterious Halloween machine, but I'll talk about that event more in just a moment. We'll look at some of the exciting themed paint schemes as well. But first, all the motorsports talk this past weekend and now trickling into this week has been about Formula One invading NASCAR's home turf. I don't mean to use such strong and inflammatory language, but that's the way people seem to be talking about this. I feel like many fans, members of the media, commentators are, in many ways, I think, jumping the gun just a little bit. There's no denying that what Formula One was able to do down in Austin, Texas this past weekend, over 350,000 fans across the whole weekend, 140,000 were in attendance for yesterday, Sunday's US Grand Prix, the main event. That is incredible. I'm not denying that by any means. Formula One is the biggest and in many ways the most prestigious motorsport in the world. They deserve that title. But many are comparing Formula One's attendance at Circuit of the Americas on Sunday to NASCAR's attendance at Kansas Speedway on Sunday as well. Both races took place at almost the exact same time. And many are saying that yesterday was a day of reckoning, if you will, for NASCAR. I'm not the one using that kind of language. That's what others are. I've read countless articles. I've seen countless Twitter threads and comments from fans of one or both series who've each lobbed in dozens of different suggestions about why Formula One's popularity is on the rise in the US, why NASCAR's popularity obviously has declined since the early 2000s, but is still, kind of just muddied, holding steady the last few years. Empty seats at NASCAR races, but packed grandstands at Circuit of the Americas. Everyone and their brother, it seems, has lobbed in a number of suggestions as to why. Why have we ended up here? What caused NASCAR's downfall? What caused Formula One's rise in the US? And I think there's at least some truth to pretty much every suggestion that's been thrown out there. I think the difference in broadcast, commercial free for Formula One, at least stateside, versus NASCAR, covered in commercials. NASCAR has changed so much in the last 20 years. The playoffs have changed themselves several times. The cars have changed a number of times. The drivers continue to change. Stages, NASCAR introducing a bunch of mile-and-a-halfs back in the day, and now seemingly in the modern day trying to get away from some of them. Changing car culture in America, whatever the case may be, there are many explanations that I think all have some truth when it comes to why NASCAR isn't as popular as it once was. When it comes to Formula One, everyone looks at the Netflix documentary, Drive to Survive. That's, I think, clearly the leading factor as to why Formula One has gotten such a grip on the US market. The presentation, the celebrity appearances, the big game, big event feel, the way they crown their champion at the end of the season is now very different than how NASCAR crowns their champion. There are tons of differences between the two series, and I think every single one of them in some way or another is true as far as why F1's on the rise and NASCAR is kind of muddled right now. But I caution everyone to not be a prisoner of the moment. What Formula One did at Circuit of the Americas this weekend was extremely impressive. That was huge. That caught everyone's attention, and rightfully so. But like I talked about last week, we're comparing apples to oranges. This weekend's race was the only Formula One race in the United States on the schedule this season. I know next year they're gonna have 2 races, and they might have 3 the year after that if things go according to plan. But that race yesterday was the first Formula One race in the United States in roughly 2 years. So of course, fans from across the country are going to pour in because this is their only opportunity to see their favorite Formula One drivers in person. Meanwhile, NASCAR, as we talked about last week, has 36, 38 Cup Series races a season, all within the continental United States. Not to mention the 33 Xfinity races and the 20-something truck races. There is no shortage of NASCAR action on a weekly basis, all within one country, all within the United States. So sure, we can look at the 40,000 fans that were in Kansas and say that's way less than the 140,000 at Circuit of the Americas, but it's important to keep a rational perspective. If Formula One raced 30 times a year in the United States, they would not get 100,000 fans at every race. Even with their newfound popularity, it just would not happen. So it's important to keep those things in perspective. But that's not to say NASCAR should be left off the hook. NASCAR has things it can improve, and we talked about this somewhat last Friday in an episode. I kind of just ranted and rambled about this, but I was reading an article in The Athletic today, and I saw a quote from Chase Elliott. I don't know when or where he said this quote, but I hadn't seen it until I read it in this Athletic piece, and this is what Chase Elliott said, comparing F1 and NASCAR, and this sums up exactly my feelings and sums up perfectly what I was trying to enunciate last week in my episode. This is from The Athletic, an article by Jeff Gluck. He says, defending NASCAR champion Chase Elliott noted much of F1's surge may have to do with how the series chooses to be portrayed. Drive to Survive, he noted, was a very respectful, very intense way for fans to discover there's more to that style of racing. It's like, this isn't funny, this is legit, Elliott said. And then the next thing was a comedy skit that came out for NASCAR, referring to the crew, that just kind of further confirmed the outside opinion that we just turn left for fun and there's nothing else to it. Chase Elliott just hit the nail directly on the head. We can talk all we want about how the different playoff formats, the schedules, the style of racing, we can talk so much about all of those differences and how they may contribute to one series' popularity or lack thereof or the other. But the number one reason Formula One is as big as it is in the United States right now is Netflix, is Drive to Survive. Fans are loving that series and are tuning into real world races, and many of them are finding reasons to root for certain drivers and are falling in love with the sport from that. But Drive to Survive is the entry point. NASCAR does not have a Drive to Survive. And I talked about this last week. NASCAR is to Ricky Bobby. Talladega Nights, that came out in 2006, did more to hurt NASCAR's reputation than help it. And NASCAR has not been able to get away from that Ricky Bobby stereotype ever since then. And I think right now in 2021, it might not have hurt so much in 2006, but in 2021, that stereotype is hurting NASCAR's growth. And Chase Elliott bringing up Drive to Survive and the crew there is a perfect illustration of that. Formula One gets a serious, dramatic docuseries that everyone loves. NASCAR in 2020, that show came out in 2020, NASCAR gets a goofy multicam sitcom with an aging Kevin James, who I'm sorry has not been relevant in the last 5-10 years. I mean, since what, Grown Ups? He was kind of relevant in that movie. When did that come out? Like 2010? My generation does not care about Kevin James. To us, he's Paul Blart Mall Cop. NASCAR is viewed on the world stage as the silly, laid-back, good old boy racing sport. Formula One, meanwhile, is seen as prestigious, serious, world-class, and that's the difference. Fans are drawn to success, are drawn to competence, if you will. And Formula One right now, between Drive to Survive and the way Sky Sports and ESPN cover the races, oozes competence and gives off an incredible vibe. Meanwhile, NASCAR specifically, and I've called them out so much this year, NASCAR on Fox at the beginning of the season, they play into that goofy, silly, Ricky Bobby theme, and that's not resonating with wide audiences. So I think Netflix, the way they've looked at NASCAR, the way they've viewed NASCAR in the last couple of years, and Formula One, how they've compared the two, that's an excellent illustration of a more broad way that the world seems to view the two motorsports. And I think if NASCAR ever wants to catch up to Formula One or wants to maintain its hold over the American motorsports audience, they're going to need to learn from Formula One. They're going to need to adapt some of Formula One's, tone or storytelling tendencies. They can't do what NASCAR on Fox has done the last couple of years. They have to get away from that as soon as humanly possible. I hope the Bubba Wallace documentary that NASCAR and Netflix are working on for next year is closer to that Drive to Survive vein, but I'm not entirely confident at this point. But I just wanted to rant about that a little bit more because that's all the conversation this past week, and it's still the conversation here this week. Formula One versus NASCAR, keep things in perspective, but focus on the tone both series are striking. NASCAR is silly and goofy to a fault, meanwhile Formula One is serious and cutting edge. That's why fans, especially young fans like my generation, are going to Formula One much faster than they're going to NASCAR. So NASCAR needs to stop that bleeding. They need to acknowledge it first and foremost. And I think hopefully current leadership is in the process of doing that. Now, I appreciate y'all sticking through that rant, but I want to talk a little bit about this Wednesday night's Groovy Hollow 200. I'm very excited. I'm working with AE Engine and Podium Esports to broadcast the Groovy Hollow 200. We've got the Halloween machine, the mystery driver. Who could it be? They're set to take on 29 iRacers Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be broadcast right here on my channel. It's going to be extremely festive. I'm finishing up work on my Halloween costume for the evening, and it's going to be for a great cause. We're raising money for Extra Life, a part of the Children's Miracle Network. Many have donated already, which is tremendous. You can learn more about the charity or donate for yourself by clicking the link down in the description below. But y'all know I love good paint schemes, and we talk all year long about my favorite Cup Series schemes on a weekly basis. Well, my boy Christopher Darling, otherwise known as Max Graphics, he's been working tirelessly the last few weeks on some special paint schemes, some Halloween themed paint schemes as well that we'll see Wednesday night in the Groovy Hollow 200. Take a look at some of these. Ooh, that orange is going to pop under the virtual Groovy Hollow lights. A lot of great Out of the Groove partners are involved in this as well. Check out Jockey with their Made in America. That red and white looks gorgeous. I'm not always a fan of green paint schemes, but this one looks spectacular. Christopher really knocked it out of the park. SiriusXM, great colors, great solid scheme as well. Oh, the NASCAR Weekly Podcast. Zoom in on the hood. You got me, you got Jarrett, Danny, Darian. Oh, of course, you got meme faces. Of course. What face? What am I making there? When did I even make that face? I don't even remember that. Oh, Blue Emu scheme as well. I want to see some of these on the real racetrack one day, but hey, Groovy Hollow in the meantime will have to suffice. Oh, Frankenstein's monster on the hood. Christopher nailed it with these Halloween designs. Oh, the blood red moon. That looks really nice. Oh, look at the yellow. That's cool. It kind of has an old school flair to it. Oh, Howie's with the haunted house. This is incredible. I love purple race cars, and this is themed to the max. Unlucky number 13. Gosh, that is so good. Other Out of the Groove partners like Lionel Racing, of course. Look at that, Lionel. Hey, if you're gonna make diecast cars, you gotta have a great looking paint scheme on your virtual car. And that's exactly what they have right there. Oh, more great red, white, and blue goodness. Love all these paint schemes. Christopher Darling knocked it out of the park. Wenzel's Farm looks great. Swan, of course, on the 6 car, the JDMotorsports.com pile number 6. I love a good themed Halloween paint scheme like that. Ooh, and third, G-Sick. I love the bars there on the side. Kind of reminds me of that old Dale Earnhardt Jr. Amp Energy scheme he drove a couple of times back in like 2012. Either way, these look absolutely fantastic. I know I'm talking about the Groovy Hollow 200, but I want you guys to get excited because we're also giving some things away during the show Wednesday night. Firstly, actually before the show, if you go down in the description to groovyhollowraceway.com, you'll have the opportunity to vote for your favorite paint scheme. We just showed you a bunch of them right there. There are also many, many more. If you vote for your favorite paint scheme, you have a chance at winning a $100 Amazon gift card. Wednesday night during the race, we'll be giving away a ton of great Out of the Groove swag. Got a couple Out of the Groove Podcast Network polo shirts to give away. What else? I know we've got a bunch of these Out of the Groove drawstring bags, groovymotorsports.com bags to give away. Oh, and of course, I know we've got a few die casts to give away as well, specifically these old Noah Gragson Lionel die casts from last season. He drove this at the Charlotte Roval. Remember the rain race? So that's a classic. So make sure you tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern time on the dot because we'll be giving away all these great items and much, much more, as well as raising money for Extra Life all throughout the evening. It's going to be a fantastic show, and I can't wait for you guys to see the identity of the Halloween machine, the mystery driver. Give me your best bets, your best guesses down in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. We talk NASCAR news, rumors, predictions, race reactions, and much, much more every single day here at Out of the Groove. And as always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters as well. I couldn't do this show without your tremendous support. We'll have more to talk about later this week. I'm sure Martinsville is shaping up to be extremely dramatic here in just a few days. See you all Wednesday night though for the Groovy Hollow 200 right here at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I can't wait. See you there.